Okay, so before you watch this video, I want you to do page 11 because it's review of graphing, graphing equations, graphing inequalities. So do this page first, and then you can go on to page 12. Now, page 12, we're going to graph the system of inequalities. So now what we're going to do is we're going to graph two inequalities on the same graph. Okay, let's start with the first one. I have y is less than or equal to x plus 3. So let's start with the y-intercept. What's the y-intercept? That would be 3. And then what's the slope? The slope is 1. So I'm going to rise 1, run 1. Okay. And if it's y is less than or equal to x plus 3, am I going to have a solid line or a dotted line? That's going to be a solid line. And if am I going to shade above the solid line or below the solid line? I'm going to shade below because it's less than. Okay. Now, the next one I have y is greater than or equal to negative 1/2 x minus 1. So let's start with the y-intercept. What's the y-intercept? The y-intercept is negative 1. And what's the slope? Negative 1/2. So I'm going to go down 1 and over 2. And then is it solid line or dotted line if it's greater than or equal to? That's a solid line. And then am I shading above the solid line or below the solid line? I'm going to shade above. And do you see that overlap right there? Everything in there is a solution to the system where these two overlap. Okay, so right in this little section here, that's the solution. Let's try another one. So I have y is less than negative x minus 1 and y is greater than 2/3 x plus 2. So let's start with the first one. What's the y-intercept? That's negative 1, so we're going to start there. What's the slope? The slope is negative 1, so go down 1 over 1. And is it a solid line or a dotted line? It should be a dotted line because y is not equal to, it's just less than. And am I going to shade above the line or below the line? Since it's less than, I'm going to shade below the line. And then for the second one, what's my y-intercept? That's 2. And then what's my slope? 2/3, so rise 2, run 3. Solid line or dotted line? It's dotted. And then shade above the line or below the line? Above. Okay, because it's greater than. And this overlap right in here, that anywhere in there is a solution to the inequality, but not anything on the dotted lines. Okay, because the dotted lines, remember, that means that it can go up to that point, but the dotted line itself is not a solution. So if we go to the next page, now we're actually going to tell if specific points are solutions to the system of inequalities. So we're going to graph, in example 1, we're going to graph both of those on the same coordinate plane, and we're going to determine if these points are solutions. So let's start with the first one. We have y is less than negative x plus 4. So what's my y-intercept? My y-intercept's 4, and what's my slope? Negative 1. So I'm going to go down 1 over 1. Or I can go up 1, negative 1. All right. And is it going to be a dotted line or a solid line? It's dotted. Okay. And then am I going to shade above or below that dotted line? I'm going to shade below. And then in the next one, what's my y-intercept? That's 1. And then my slope is what? 1. So I'm going to rise 1, run 1. Or I can go down 1 and negative 1. Okay. Solid line or dotted line? Solid line. Shade above or below? Below. And now we need to figure out, is the point 2, 1 a solution? So remember, everything where it overlaps, all that see if this works. No. All that is solution where it overlaps in here. Okay. All right, so now this should be a little bit easier to see. Is the point 2, 1 a solution? So see this overlap in here? Any point in there is a solution. So let's start with 2, 1. So over 2, up 1, right in there. Is that a solution? Is that in the overlap? Yes, it is. That would be a solution. How about 1, 3? So over 1, up 3. Is that in the overlap? That would be no. Okay. It's almost on that dotted line right there, so that doesn't work out. How about 3, 3? Over 3, up 3. Is that a solution? No, that is not a solution because it's only in the blue area. It's not where the blue and the red overlap. Yeah. So that's how you find a solution with a system of inequalities. So let's do a few more. And we're going to graph these inequalities. Okay. So for the first one, what's the y-intercept? That's 5. And then what's the slope? -1, so go down 1 over 1. Solid or dotted line? Solid, because it's underlined, it's equal to. And above or below the solid line? Above. And the next one we have minus y is less than or equal to 3x minus 4. What is the y-intercept? It's -4. Whoops. And the slope is 3, so rise 3, run 1. Solid line, am I going to shade above or below the line? I'm going to shade below the line. Okay. And then there's that overlap right there. All right, for B, let's start with the first one. What's the y-intercept? That's -5, so let's start with -5. Oops. And then the slope, what's the slope? That's 2. So your line should look something like this, and it is a dotted line because it's not underlined. And I'm going to shade above or below the line. I'm going to shade above the line. Now, for the next one, we have a little bit of a problem here. You see how all these had y is greater than or less than? This one doesn't. So what do you think we have to do here before we can graph it? We need to solve for y. So what's my first step in solving for y on this one? I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. And now what do? I'm going to divide both sides by -4. But don't forget, what are you supposed to do when you divide by a negative number? You got to turn the sign around. So now here is my equation. Y equals 12 divided by -4 is -3. And then a negative divided by a negative gives me plus 3 over 4x. So now let's graph this. What is the y-intercept? That's -3. What's the slope? 3 over 4, so rise 3, run 4. Solid line or dotted line? That would be a dotted line. And am I going to shade above or below? I'm going to shade above. And then right here, where they overlap, any point in there would be a solution. And now the last one, we have y is greater than 2. So this is a Hoy-Vux type situation. When we have a y equals, am I going to do a horizontal line or a vertical line? That's actually going to be a horizontal line. And is it dotted or solid? It's going to be dotted. And since y is greater than 2, am I going to shade above or below that horizontal line? I'm going to shade above. And then when we have x equals, is that horizontal or vertical? That's vertical. And is it going to be solid or dotted? It's going to be solid because it could equal 3, -3. And am I going to shade to the right or to the left? I'm going to shade to the left because I want numbers that are less than -3. And then this little corner right here, any point in there as a solution. So do page 14. Okay, give it a try, and then we will check our answers next class.